The janitor moved quietly through the long hallways of the building, his mop gliding across the shiny floors in a rhythm he had almost come to find comforting. It was late, past the time when most people had gone home. The echoes of his movements were the only sounds that broke the quiet. He had been working here for years, cleaning the offices, the hallways, the restrooms, and yet no one really noticed him. People passed by, nodding politely if they had to, but mostly he was invisible. He had learned to enjoy the invisibility in a strange way. It gave him space to think, to remember things he had almost forgotten. He thought about his child, sleeping at home, probably dreaming of something he didn't know about yet. Being a single dad was exhausting, but it was also the reason he kept going. The job didn't pay much, but it was steady. It allowed him to provide a small but secure life for the little one. He loved more than anything. The janitor's life was not easy. Every day was a cycle of work, care, and exhaustion. He woke up before the sun, prepared breakfast, got his child ready for school, then walked to the building to start his shift. By the time he returned home, the day was over, and he would collapse into bed, only to do it all over again the next day. There was little time for anything else, but in those rare quiet moments, he found a small corner of peace. Music had once been the center of his world, but those days seemed far away now, almost like a dream, as he pushed the mop along the floor. He glanced at the large hall where the grand piano stood in the corner. It was old, polished, and beautiful, sitting there as if waiting for someone to notice it. The janitor had passed it 100 times, but tonight, something about it drew him in. He stopped in front of it, the mop resting against the wall, and simply stared. The room was empty, the lights dimmed to a soft glow, and for the first time in years he felt a pull he hadn't felt in a long time. He approached the piano cautiously, his fingers brushing over the keys without pressing them. He closed his eyes and let the memories of music wash over him. He remembered sitting at a piano as a child, the sound of the notes filling the room, and the way his heart had soared with every melody he played. Music had been his escape, his joy, and now it felt like a lost part of him that he might never get back. But tonight, something inside him stirred. It was as if the piano itself was calling to him, telling him that it was time to play again. The janitor sat down on the bench, feeling the familiar weight of the seat beneath him. His hands hovered over the keys, trembling slightly. He had not played in years, not since life had forced him to put his dreams aside. But the feeling was still there, deep inside, waiting to be awakened. He took a deep breath and pressed the first key. The sound was soft, almost hesitant, but it was enough to make him smile. It was real, and it was his. He began to play slowly, each note carefully chosen, each movement deliberate. The music started quietly, like a whisper, filling the empty hall with a sense of longing and emotion. He played not for anyone else, but for himself, for the part of him that had been silenced for so long. The sound echoed through the building, bouncing off the walls and lingering in the air. It was a sound that carried memories, stories, and dreams all at once. As he played, he allowed himself to remember more than just the music. He thought about the nights he had spent practicing, the small victories, the moments of pure joy when a piece finally came together. He thought about the sacrifices he had made, the nights he had stayed home instead of performing, the times he had chosen stability over passion. And yet, despite it all, the music had never left him. It had been waiting quietly, patiently. For the moment he could return, the janitor lost track of time as he continued to play. Each note seemed to carry a part of his soul, a story of struggle, love, and resilience. He did not notice the soft footsteps approaching from the other end of the hall. He did not see the people who had stopped to listen, drawn by the unexpected sound. He was lost in the music, completely absorbed. As if the rest of the world had disappeared, it was a strange experience. Playing in a place where no one expected him to have talent, where no one imagined that the janitor could create something so beautiful. He had always been careful to keep this part of himself hidden, believing that it had no place in the world he lived in now. But tonight, it felt like the piano and he were the only two people in the world, sharing a secret that was just for them. As the melody grew, so did his confidence. His fingers moved more freely, the music becoming richer, fuller. He experimented with the chords, letting his emotions guide him, letting the memories and dreams spill out in sound. He was surprised at how easily it came back, as if no time had passed at all. The years of silence melted away with each note, leaving only the pure, raw expression of who he was. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine a different life, one where he could follow his passion without worry or guilt. He imagined performing on stage, sharing his music with people who understood and appreciated it. He imagined his child sitting in the audience, eyes wide with admiration and pride. The thought made his heart swell, and he poured that feeling into the music, letting it resonate with every fiber of his being. The Janitor's playing became a story in itself, a journey through his past, present, and the dreams he still held on to. It was a story of quiet resilience, of love and sacrifice, of a man who had been overlooked but had never given up on himself completely. The music was a voice he had long denied, and now it spoke louder than ever. Unbeknownst to him, the hall had filled with a small crowd. People had stopped, mesmerized by the sound that seemed to come from nowhere. They watched quietly, afraid to interrupt, afraid to break the spell. They had walked past him countless times, never noticing him, never realizing that the man who mopped the floors could create something so profound. And now, they were witnessing it. And it was impossible to ignore. The Janitor continued to play, still unaware of his audience. He was in his own world, a place where nothing else mattered, a place where the music was enough. The notes carried his story, his struggles, and his love, and the people who listened could feel it too. They were drawn into the music, transported to a place they had never been. A place where the ordinary became extraordinary. Time seemed to stretch and bend as he played. He did not notice the hours slipping by, the way the lights in the hall dimmed as the night grew late. All that mattered was the connection between him and the piano, the way the music allowed him to express what words never could. It was a moment of pure honesty, a glimpse into the heart of a man who had lived a life of quiet dedication and unseen talent. When he finally paused, there was a moment of silence. The hall seemed to hold its breath, as if waiting for him to continue. He looked up, startled to see the crowd. Their faces were a mix of awe, admiration, and disbelief. For the first time, he realized that people had been listening all along, that his music had touched them in a way he had never imagined. He felt a mixture of embarrassment and pride. He had not intended to perform, not for anyone else, but now he saw the impact of his music. The Janitor, who had always been invisible, was suddenly seen, not for his job, but for the gift he had carried inside him all along. The realization was overwhelming, and for a moment he did not know what to say or do. The people in the hall began to clap, softly at first, then louder until the sound filled the space. The Janitor stood, bowing slightly, feeling a warmth he had not felt in years. The music had done what words could not. It had connected him to the world. It made him visible in a way that nothing else could. He felt a spark of hope, a reminder that even in the midst of struggle and exhaustion, there was still beauty to be found, still a way to touch lives through something that came from the heart. As the crowd dispersed, the Janitor remained by the piano, gently pressing a few final notes. He smiled to himself, a quiet, contented smile, knowing that he had reclaimed a part of himself that had been hidden for too long. The music was his, and now, for the first time in years, it felt like it had a place in the world once again. He packed up his cleaning supplies and left the hall, the echoes of the music still lingering in the air. He knew life would go on, as it always did, with its challenges and responsibilities, but something inside him had changed. He had remembered who he was, what he loved, and that even in the most ordinary of lives, extraordinary moments could happen. The Janitor walked home through the quiet streets, carrying the music in his heart. Ready to face tomorrow with a renewed sense of hope and purpose, the Janitor sat on the piano bench, his hands hovering over the keys as if they were a delicate treasure he had not touched in years. The quiet hall around him seemed to hold its breath, waiting. He could hear his own heartbeat, steady but nervous, reminding him of every choice he had made, every sacrifice that had brought him to this moment. His life had been full of responsibilities, work, and care for his child. But tonight, the music called him back to a part of himself he had long ignored. He pressed a key gently, letting the soft note linger in the air. The sound was almost foreign, yet familiar, a reminder of a time when music had been his closest friend. Memories of his childhood, of long afternoons at the piano with his parents encouraging him, flashed through his mind. Music had always been his escape, the thing that made him feel alive, and now, after so many years, it returned to him like a friend he had not seen in a lifetime. At first, his playing was hesitant. He tested each note carefully, unsure if his fingers would remember the movements, unsure if the melodies would come back as easily as he hoped. But slowly, the familiarity returned. He played a simple melody at first, letting it grow naturally, allowing the music to flow through him. With every note, the tension in his shoulders eased, and he felt a sense of freedom he had not experienced in years. As he became more comfortable, his hands moved with confidence. He played a piece he had once performed for friends and family, a composition full of hope and light. The sound filled the hall, reverberating off the walls, soft at first, then swelling with emotion. Each note carried the weight of his experiences, the struggles of a single father, the nights he had spent worrying about bills, and the quiet moments of love with his child. The music was more than sound. It was a story of his life. He was lost in the melody when he first noticed the soft echo of footsteps in the hall. He looked up, startled, and saw a few people standing at a distance, drawn by the music. Their expressions were a mixture of surprise and curiosity. They had never expected the janitor to be capable of creating such beauty. For a moment, he felt self-conscious, unsure if he should stop. But the music had become a part of him again, and he could not simply abandon it. He continued to play, letting the audience gather quietly. People who had walked past him countless times without a second glance were now standing still, listening intently. Their eyes widened, and some whispered to each other in amazement. No one had ever seen this side of him before, a side that could command a grand piano and fill a space with something magical and profound. The contrast between his everyday appearance and the brilliance of his music was striking. It's almost surreal. As he played, he remembered why he had loved music so much. It was not about applause or recognition. It was about expression, about releasing emotions that words could never capture. He thought about the joy and heartache he had experienced, about the moments he had felt invisible in the world, and how music had always been his secret companion. Each note he pressed was a bridge between the past and the present. Between the man he had been and the man he was becoming, the melody grew richer and more complex. Weaving through minor chords and major harmonies, he experimented with rhythm and tempo, letting his emotions guide him. The music carried a sense of longing, of struggle, but also a quiet strength. It was as if the piano itself knew his story, and together they were telling it to anyone willing to listen. The people in the hall were captivated, holding their breath as the notes danced through the air, each one more moving than the last. A young woman, standing near the back, had tears in her eyes. She had been having a difficult week, feeling lost and overwhelmed, but the music seemed to reach straight into her heart. She was not alone in her reaction. Others shifted uncomfortably, moved by something they could not fully explain. The janitor's playing transcended age, background, and circumstance. It was pure, raw, and honest, touching everyone in a way that few things could. He glanced briefly at the growing crowd, feeling both nervous and proud. He had never sought attention for his talent, never imagined anyone would care about it. But seeing the impact of his music, the way it affected people, was deeply moving. He realized that his music had power, not the kind that earned fame or money, but the kind that connected people, that reminded them of beauty and hope in the world. As he continued, he allowed himself to explore new ideas, improvising melodies that came from deep within. His fingers danced over the keys with increasing confidence, creating harmonies that seemed to rise naturally from his soul. Each note was a reflection of his life, a tapestry of experiences woven together through sound. He thought about his child, imagining the pride and wonder in those eyes if they could see this moment. If they could see that their parent had a hidden world of creativity and passion. Time seemed to lose meaning as he played. The world outside the hall faded, leaving only the music and the people who had come to listen. Some of them had cameras and phones out, hesitant to break the magic but wanting to capture the moment. Others simply stood quietly, letting the sound wash over them. No one wanted to interrupt. No one wanted to disturb the spell that had been created by a man who had been overlooked for so long. The janitor noticed small details in the hall as he played. The way the light from the overhead lamps reflected on the polished floors, the subtle movement of people swaying to the rhythm, the gentle rustle of clothing and whispered breaths. These details reminded him that he was not alone. His music had the ability to touch others in a way he had never imagined. It was a feeling both humbling and exhilarating, a reminder that even the simplest act could have profound effects. As the music reached a climactic point, his emotions surged. Memories of hardship, loneliness, and perseverance poured into his playing. He allowed himself to feel every joy, every sorrow, every moment of fear and hope that had shaped his life. The piano became an extension of himself, a voice for feelings that had no words. The people listening were captivated, feeling the intensity of his expression without needing to understand the specifics of his life. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of silence. The hall seemed to hold its breath, as if reluctant to let go of the experience. The janitor lifted his hands from the keys, unsure of what to do next. He had given everything he had to the music, and now he felt both exhausted and exhilarated. The people around him began to clap softly at first, then with increasing enthusiasm. Their applause was sincere, heartfelt, a recognition of something rare and beautiful. The janitor stood slowly, bowing slightly in acknowledgement. He felt a warmth spreading through him, a feeling he had not experienced in years. He realized that for the first time in a long time, he had shared a part of himself with the world, and it had been received with admiration and respect. The applause continued, some people smiling, some wiping tears from their eyes, all of them deeply moved. A man from the crowd stepped forward, speaking quietly but with excitement. He asked about the janitor's background, about how he had learned to play so well, and whether he had performed elsewhere. The janitor shook his head, modest and humble, explaining that life had taken him on a different path, that his music had been a private refuge, and that he had never thought to perform publicly. The man nodded, clearly impressed, and encouraged him to consider sharing his talent more widely. The janitor felt a mixture of pride and disbelief. He had not sought recognition, yet here it was, offered in abundance. The thought that his music could inspire others, that it could bring beauty and comfort to people who needed it, filled him with a sense of purpose he had not felt in years. He realized that his life as a janitor did not define him. His music, his talent, his heart, and his resilience defined who he was. As people began to leave, they approached him to express their gratitude and admiration. Some spoke of how the music had touched them personally, how it had lifted their spirits in ways they could not explain. Others encouraged him to continue playing, to share his gift with a wider audience. The janitor listened, deeply moved, feeling a connection to each person. Knowing that in this brief encounter he had made a difference, he returned to the piano briefly. Pressing a few quiet notes as a farewell, the sound was soft, reflective, a gentle reminder that the music would always be a part of him. As he packed up his cleaning supplies and prepared to leave the hall, he felt a renewed sense of hope and determination. His life would continue to be full of challenges, but now he knew that there was more to him than the world had seen, that there was beauty and talent hidden within, waiting for the right moment to shine. Walking home through the quiet streets, he carried the music in his heart. The memory of the hall, the piano, and the people who had listened would stay with him forever. He imagined his child at home, curious about the excitement he might bring, and felt a deep sense of love and responsibility. The night had shown him that even in the most ordinary of lives, extraordinary moments could happen, and that talent, courage, and passion could emerge when least expected. The janitor thought about the future as he walked. Perhaps he could find time to play more often, to explore his music further, to share it in ways he had never considered. The idea of performing, of touching more lives through his art, was both thrilling and frightening, but he felt ready to embrace it. The night had reminded him that life was full of possibilities, and that even a single man with a humble job could create something truly remarkable. As he reached his small apartment, he paused to take a deep breath. The city lights twinkled around him, the world moving on as always, but for the janitor, everything felt different. He had rediscovered a part of himself that had been hidden for too long, and in doing so, he had reminded others of the power of art, of human emotion, and of the beauty that exists in unexpected places. The night had changed him, and perhaps... The janitor stepped back from the piano for a moment, breathing deeply, his hands still tingling from the final chords he had just played. The applause had faded, but the energy in the room lingered, like a quiet hum that refused to leave. He looked around at the crowd, a mix of strangers who had stopped to listen, their expressions reflecting a mixture of awe, curiosity, and a little disbelief. He had never imagined that something he had kept inside for so long could touch people in this way at first. He thought the moment was over, that his music had been a fleeting connection. But the murmurs in the crowd told a different story. People whispered to each other, sharing their amazement. They were trying to understand how a man who spent his days cleaning offices and hallways could produce music so full of life and emotion. It was not just talent, it was passion, depth, and a story that spoke through every note. Some of the listeners stepped closer, hesitant at first, unsure if they should intrude. But the janitor did not stop. Encouraged by the energy in the room, he returned to the piano and began to play again, this time with more confidence. The melody was different now, more complex, more daring. He experimented with chords he had never tried in years, letting his emotions guide his hands. Each note seemed to flow naturally, almost as if the piano had remembered him as well as he remembered it. The music became a conversation, a dialogue between the janitor and the world that had often overlooked him. He expressed his struggles, his fears, his quiet victories, and the love he had for his child. Every key he pressed was an extension of his heart, and the audience felt it. They could sense the authenticity, the raw honesty that had always been a part of him, but had never been shared. For the first time, they were witnessing the real man behind the mop and janitor's uniform. People began to move closer, forming a semicircle around him. Some leaned against walls, some crouched on the floor. A few stood with hands over their mouths, unable to believe what they were hearing. The music had stopped being just a performance. It had become a bridge between lives, a shared experience that connected everyone present. The janitor felt it too, a sense of unity that he had never expected, a realization that his gift had meaning beyond his own life. He continued playing, pouring every ounce of feeling into the piano. The melody rose and fell, gentle at times, passionate at others. He thought about the long days he had endured, the exhaustion of raising a child alone, and the quiet moments of joy that kept him going. He thought about how invisible he had often felt, and how music had been the only thing that allowed him to express himself freely. And now, here in this hall, with the lights reflecting off the polished floor and faces filled with wonder, he realized that he was no longer invisible. A woman in the front row wiped tears from her eyes. She had come to the building tired and frustrated, overwhelmed by work and life's pressures. But the music spoke to her in ways words never could. It reminded her of dreams she had almost forgotten, of the power of quiet determination, and of the beauty that could exist even in ordinary lives. She was not alone in feeling this way. Others shared similar reactions, though each experienced it differently. Some smiled, some stared in awe, and some simply sat quietly, letting the music wash over them. The janitor's mind wandered to his child at home. He imagined what it would be like if they could see him now, witnessing the surprise and pride in their eyes. The thought gave him strength, and he allowed it to infuse the music. Each chord became a message, a story of love and perseverance. He realized that this was not just about talent. It was about connection, about reaching out to people through something deeply human, something that transcended job titles, appearances, or social expectations. As the music swelled, so did the reaction of the crowd. Some began whispering to each other about what they were witnessing. They compared the music to professional performances, astonished that such skill came from someone who worked as a janitor. A few people even recorded small snippets on their phones, hoping to capture a piece of the magic, though they knew nothing could truly replicate the experience of being there. In that moment, with the man and his piano, the janitor lost track of time completely. The hall, once quiet and empty, now buzzed with energy. He was aware of the audience in a general sense, but his focus remained on the piano and the music flowing through him. The melodies were not planned. They were spontaneous, shaped by emotion, memory, and instinct. Each variation in tempo, each subtle change in rhythm, told a story. He was telling his life's story, and the audience was listening, completely absorbed. He allowed the music to reach a quieter, more reflective phase. The notes softened, floating through the hall like a gentle breeze. In this moment, he shared his vulnerability, the fears and doubts that had accompanied him through life. People leaned in closer, sensing the honesty in every sound. There was a deep empathy in the air, a recognition of shared human experience. Even though no one in the room knew his personal struggles fully, they felt the emotion, understood the unspoken pain and hope embedded in the music. A man stepped forward tentatively, unable to contain his admiration. He asked quietly how long the janitor had been playing, curious about the story behind the talent. The janitor smiled humbly, explaining that music had always been a part of his life, though circumstances had forced him to set it aside. He spoke softly about the balance between survival and passion, about raising a child alone and the sacrifices that came with it. The man nodded, moved by the humility and sincerity, recognizing the resilience that lay behind every note played as the evening progressed. More people joined the hall, drawn by the sound of the piano. What had started as a small, accidental audience had grown into a gathering of strangers, connected by the power of music. Each person brought their own life experiences, yet all were united in the appreciation of something beautiful and unexpected. The janitor felt an unusual warmth, a sense of purpose that he had not known he was missing. His music had touched people in ways that nothing else could. He experimented further, blending gentle, soothing tones with moments of intensity, allowing the story of his life to unfold in the music. The audience responded instinctively, reacting to the changes, to the highs and lows, to the ebb and flow of emotion. There was a silent conversation happening between the janitor and the listeners, shared understanding that transcended words. He realized that this connection, however fleeting, was profoundly meaningful. As he played, he reflected on the irony of his situation. Here he was, a man often overlooked and underestimated, creating something that moved people deeply. The same world that had ignored him during the day was now captivated by his talent. It was a powerful reminder that appearances were deceptive, that talent and beauty could exist anywhere. Even in those whom society deemed ordinary or unremarkable, the music shifted again, becoming more playful and lively. He added subtle flourishes, small improvisations that reflected his creativity and spontaneity. The audience reacted with subtle nods, smiles, and soft gasps, responding to the unexpected turns in melody and rhythm. The hall was alive with a collective energy, a shared experience that would linger long after the last note had faded. The janitor could feel it, a vibration in the room that spoke of human connection and the transformative power of art. He played with a renewed sense of confidence, knowing that his music was making a difference. It was not about recognition or fame. It was about touching lives, sharing a piece of himself with people who needed it, consciously or unconsciously. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction, a validation that had nothing to do with money or status. But with authenticity and emotional honesty, the janitor glanced at the faces in the crowd again. Noticing the wide range of reactions, some were visibly moved, some were contemplative, and some were simply amazed. He felt gratitude for their presence, for their willingness to stop and listen, to allow themselves to be affected by something so pure and human. It was a reminder that even in a world full of distraction and busyness, people still craved connection, still responded to genuine expression. The music gradually softened, coming to a gentle close. The final notes hung in the air, lingering like a memory, and then faded into silence. The hall remained quiet for a moment, as if unwilling to break the spell. The janitor lifted his hands from the keys, feeling a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. He had shared something deeply personal, something he had guarded for years. The response had been overwhelmingly positive. The audience erupted into applause, spontaneous and heartfelt. The janitor stood, bowing slightly, feeling a sense of pride and humility all at once. People approached him, expressing their admiration and gratitude. Some asked questions about his background, others simply smiled, acknowledging the beauty of the moment. He realized that he had made a lasting impression, that his music had created a memory for everyone who had been there. He packed up his cleaning supplies slowly, savoring the last moments in the hall. The janitor knew that life would return to its usual rhythm tomorrow, with work, responsibilities, and challenges. But he also knew that something had changed within him. He had rediscovered his passion, his voice, and the knowledge that he could touch lives through something that was uniquely his. Walking home through the quiet streets, he reflected on the evening. The experience had reminded him of the power of art, of persistence, and of human connection. He thought about his child, imagining the pride and wonder they would feel if they knew. He felt a renewed sense of purpose, a belief that even the smallest actions, the quietest expressions of talent, could create ripples of impact. The janitor realized that this was only the beginning. He had found a way to integrate his music back into his life, to balance responsibility with passion, and to reclaim a part of himself that had been lost. The audience had seen more than Rutha. Janitor remained standing beside the piano for a moment, his hands still brushing the keys gently, savoring the lingering sound of the final notes. The applause had died down, replaced by whispers and soft exclamations from the people who had gathered. They were talking quietly among themselves, trying to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Some shook their heads in disbelief, some smiled in admiration, and some simply stared, as if afraid that any movement might break the spell that had just been woven. He felt a mix of emotions himself. Pride, certainly, but also a sense of humility. He had never imagined that anyone would react this way. For so long, he had been invisible, just another face in the crowd, unnoticed and unremarkable. But now here he was, standing in front of people who saw him not for the work he did, but for the music he created, for the talent and soul he had nurtured quietly for years. It was overwhelming in a way he had never experienced before. One of the women in the crowd approached him hesitantly. She spoke softly, her voice tinged with awe. She asked how long he had been playing the piano, where he had learned, and why he had stopped performing for so long. The janitor smiled, answering each question with honesty. He explained that music had always been a part of his life, that circumstances and responsibilities had pulled him away from it, but that it had never truly left him. His words were simple, but they carried the weight of years of experience, sacrifice, of moments lost and found. As they spoke, more people in the hall began to approach. Some were curious, some wanted to express gratitude, and some simply wanted to be near the man who had created such beauty in a place where it was least expected. Each interaction was different, but each left an impression. The janitor noticed the way people leaned in, listened closely, and smiled genuinely. He realized that his music had broken barriers, and it had touched people on a deeply personal level. A young man stepped forward, holding a small notebook. He was a music student, he explained, and he had been searching for inspiration for weeks. Hearing the janitor play had sparked something inside him. He asked if the janitor could share some tips, some insight into his approach to music, how he managed to convey so much emotion. The janitor chuckled softly, humbled by the question, and shared what he could, emphasizing practice, patience, and above all, playing from the heart. The crowd continued to grow, and more stories began to emerge. People shared how the music had affected them personally, how it had reminded them of someone they had lost, or how it had lifted a burden they had been carrying. The janitor listened, quietly moved, realizing that his music had not only entertained but had healed in some small way. Each story was a reminder that art could reach beyond words, beyond appearances, and touch the very essence of who people were. Some of the audience members had cameras and phones, recording the moment, capturing the expressions, the atmosphere, and the music itself. The janitor was aware of them, but did not focus on it. He remained humble, knowing that the true value of the moment was in the shared experience, not in the documentation. The presence of the audience, their reactions, their engagement was enough. It was a connection that transcended any recording, any social media post. Any comment, or As the night progressed, the janitor played a few more pieces, each different in tone and style. Some were lively, playful compositions that made people smile and laugh softly. Others were reflective and poignant, evoking deeper emotions and moments of quiet contemplation. He allowed himself to improvise, to follow his instincts and feelings, creating music that was alive and spontaneous. The audience responded instinctively, leaning in, nodding, smiling as if they were part of the music itself. One older man standing near the back spoke to the janitor quietly. He explained that he had once been a musician himself, but life had pulled him away from it, much like the janitor. He expressed admiration for the courage and passion the janitor displayed, for returning to something that was so important to him despite the years of absence. The janitor nodded, understanding completely. It was a shared understanding, a bond between two people who had known the pull of music and the demands of life. The janitor noticed the subtle ways people were moved. A few wiped away tears, a few smiled knowingly, and some simply closed their eyes, letting the music fill them. There was a quiet energy in the hall, a shared experience that transcended the ordinary. People who had never met before were united by the sound of the piano and the story it told. The janitor felt a profound sense of connection, realizing that his gift had created a community. Even if only for a short while, he thought about his child again, imagining what they would say if they could see him now. The pride, the wonder, the realization that their parent had a hidden talent that could astonish and inspire. That thought gave him a deep sense of satisfaction and motivation. He knew that the next day the routine of life would continue, but tonight was different. Tonight, he had made a mark, not for fame, not for recognition, but for the simple human connection that music could bring. As he played, he also thought about the future. Perhaps he could find a way to integrate music back into his daily life, to balance the responsibilities of parenthood and work with the joy and fulfillment that playing the piano brought him. The audience had reminded him that his talent was valuable, not just to himself, but to the people who could experience it. It was a revelation that filled him with hope and determination. A small group of students, quietly observing, approached him after a particularly emotional piece. They asked questions about technique, expression, and practice routines. The janitor shared what he could, emphasizing the importance of feeling the music, of allowing emotion to guide the hands, and of never losing sight of why one plays in the first place. They listened intently, taking notes, and absorbing not the technical aspects but the philosophy of music he conveyed. The janitor also noticed a few people in the audience who seemed hesitant, unsure of how to respond. He smiled at them, subtly encouraging them to relax and enjoy the experience. Music, he realized, had a way of breaking down barriers, of easing tension, and of reaching people who might otherwise remain closed off. He saw the change in their expressions, the softening of lines, the small smiles that emerged as they allowed themselves to feel as the evening wore on. More people joined, drawn by the sound and the stories they had heard. Some had come for a few minutes expecting nothing more than background noise. But they stayed, captivated by the depth of feeling in the music. They had witnessed an ordinary man reveal an extraordinary gift, and the effect was profound. The hall had transformed from a quiet, empty space into a place of connection, inspiration, shared emotion. The janitor realized that he had become part of something larger than himself. His music had created a ripple effect, reaching people in ways he had not anticipated. Some would carry the memory with them for years. Others would share the story with friends and family. While some might even be inspired to rediscover their own passions. It was a reminder that even small actions, sincere and heartfelt, could have far-reaching consequences. He played a final piece, a quiet, reflective composition that seemed to capture the essence of the evening. The notes were soft, deliberate, and full of emotion. Echoing through the hall and lingering in the hearts of everyone present, The audience listened in silence, fully aware that they were witnessing something rare and meaningful. When the last note faded, there was a moment of stillness, a collective intake of breath, as if everyone were savoring the end of a story that had touched them deeply. The applause that followed was overwhelming, spontaneous, and heartfelt. People cheered, some clapped enthusiastically, and others simply smiled with tears in their eyes. The janitor stood, bowing humbly, feeling a mixture of exhaustion, pride, and gratitude. He had shared a part of himself that had been hidden for years, and the response had been more than he could have imagined. It was validation not of fame or skill alone, but of the human spirit, of resilience, and of the quiet power of passion. As the crowd began to disperse, people approached him individually to express their gratitude. Some spoke softly, sharing personal stories of how the music had touched them. Others offered encouragement, suggesting he'd consider performing more often or even teaching. The janitor listened to each person, moved by the sincerity and warmth in their words. He realized that this was a turning point, a moment that could shape not only his future, but also the lives of those he had reached. Packing up his supplies and leaving the hall, he walked through the quiet streets with a sense of fulfillment. The night had reminded him of who he was, of the importance of following his passions, and of the impact one person could have when they shared their true self with the world. He thought about his child, imagining the pride and amazement they would feel, and felt a renewed commitment to nurture both their life and his own talents. The janitor knew that life would continue, with its challenges and responsibilities, but he also understood that moments like this were rare and precious. They were reminders that even in the most ordinary lives, extraordinary experiences could happen. Music had given him a voice, a way to connect, to inspire, and to heal. It had transformed a quiet evening into a lasting memory, a story that would be carried forward in the hearts of everyone who had been present. He felt a deep sense of gratitude, both for the opportunity to play and for the people who had listened, truly listened. The experience had been more than he could have anticipated, and it had reignited a flame that he had feared was extinguished. He knew that tomorrow would bring its routines, but the memory of the night, the reactions of the audience, and the power of music would remain with him, guiding him and reminding him of the beauty in life and the importance of following one's heart. The janitor. The echoes of the evening still ringing in his ears. The streets were quiet, lit by the soft glow of streetlights, and the cool night air carried a sense of calm he had not felt in a long time. His mind replayed the music, the faces of the audience, the emotions that had been exchanged without words. It had been an extraordinary night, one that would stay with him forever, and he realized that life could hold unexpected moments of joy and recognition, even in the midst of routine and responsibility. When he reached his small apartment, he paused to look up at the window where his child was probably sleeping. He imagined their face, peaceful and untroubled, unaware of the surprise and delight that awaited them in the morning. The thought brought a smile to his face. Being a single parent was difficult, full of challenges and exhaustion, but nights like this reminded him why he persevered. He had worked hard, sacrificed much, and yet there were rewards that no one could anticipate. Moments that made every struggle worthwhile. The next morning, the janitor prepared breakfast as usual, moving through the motions with a quiet satisfaction. He thought about telling his child what had happened the night before, how music had carried him, how strangers had stopped to listen, and how he had felt seen in a way he never had before. When his child came to the kitchen, he shared the story in simple words, careful to convey the excitement and the wonder without exaggeration. The child's eyes widened in surprise and pride, a look that made his heart swell. They listened intently, imagining the grand piano, the crowd, and the music that had moved so many people. The janitor thought about how this experience might change things. He had always dreamed of performing, of sharing his music, but circumstances had kept him from pursuing it seriously. Now, seeing the impact it had had, he felt a renewed sense of possibility. Perhaps he could find ways to integrate music into his life more consistently, to teach, to perform occasionally, and to inspire others who might feel overlooked or hidden in their own lives. The thought was exhilarating, and he felt a spark of hope that he had not allowed himself to feel in years.